Antarctica is Earth's most southern continent that resides mostly within the Antarctic Circle. It is the coldest place on Earth and has the record for the world's coldest temperature, -89 degrees Celsius or -129 degrees Fahrenheit. However, Antarctica has some heat, housing volcanoes, including Mount Elbrus, the southernmost active volcano. Antarctica is divided in half by the Transantarctic Mountains. Antarctica has southern lights, which are the same natural light show as the Arctic's northern lights. 2% of Antarctica is barren rock. The other 98% is covered by the Antarctic ice sheet, which averages at least 1.6 kilometers or 1 mile thick. This sheet holds about 90% of the world's ice and about 70% of the world's fresh water. If all this ice melted, sea levels would rise about 200 feet or 60 meters. With all this ice, it's hard to believe that Antarctica is actually a desert, but it receives only a few inches of precipitation a year, so technically it is a desert. It has so much ice because it is so cold that the precipitation doesn't melt, so year after century, it builds up. Earth's ozone hole happens over Antarctica. It was first noticed in the 1970s by British researchers monitoring the atmosphere above Antarctica from a research station. But it was confirmed in 1985, which made global headlines. But the instrument data was so off that many questioned if it could be instrument failure. But the ozone hole is real, and it can be bigger than the Antarctic continent, or about 1.5 times the size of the United States. Today it is expected the ozone hole won't recover until about 2065. Antarctica has no ancient human or year-round population. The first people to set foot here was the early explorers, but it wasn't until research stations were set up that humans lived here, especially in the Antarctic summers, when the majority of research station workers are there. But the real citizens of Antarctica are the whales, orcas, seals, and the emperor penguins that breed during the winter in Antarctica. Research stations house Antarctica's only human population. The United States McMurdo Station is the largest, serving about 1,200 people in the summer and 200 in the winter. The U.S. also has 2 other stations. Russia also has 3, but Australia has 4, and the UK has 2. Germany, France, South Africa, and New Zealand have 1. These stations are home to Antarctica's only human population. They are also home to dozens of Antarctica's airports. The last unexplored place on Earth has a booming tourism industry. In the 1950s, scenic overflights began, which in 1977 resulted in Antarctica having a plane crash into Mount Elbrus. In the late 60s, boats appeared, both private and charters, which, like everything else from the pivotal late 60s, early 70s, increased. So did people visiting. In the 1999-2000 season, about 15,000 people visited Antarctica, which a decade later rose to over 37,000, a lot of which made it to land in an inflatable boat or even by helicopter. The Antarctica Treaty was signed by 12 countries in 1959. It set aside Antarctica as a scientific preserve. It also banned military activity, such as building military bases or conducting military maneuvers or testing any type of weapon. It also established it as a no-nuke zone, free of nuclear tests and the disposal of radioactive waste. Today, the treaty is signed by 46 countries, which have 80% of the world's population. which sounds good until you realize that today the biggest threat to Antarctica is something the world doesn't have a treaty on: global warming.